In the summer of 1984, life in the Long Island suburbs still moved with an easy kind of trust. Teenagers crossed town on foot, friends met at payphones, roller rinks, and delis. Parents expected their children home by a certain hour, and usually had no reason to fear the dark streets between one stop and the next. In Lynbrook, that sense of safety was about to break apart, one girl at a time. Kelly Morrissey was 15 years old when she vanished on June 12, 1984. She was the kind of girl who rarely stayed inside for long. She liked being with her friends. She moved easily through the neighborhood, meeting people at familiar places and making plans as she went. That evening after dinner, she left home and said she would be back by 9:30. There was nothing unusual about it. A girl her age walking out the front door alone did not set off alarms in that world. It was ordinary. It was routine. It was the last normal moment her family would have with her. Buh. Kelly had grown up in a large blended family. Her mother, Iris, and Paul Olmsted were raising 8 children together. The house was busy, full of footsteps, doors opening and closing, and voices drifting from one room to another. That night, someone heard a child come in and assumed it was Kelly. No one realized the truth until the next morning, when she did not come down for school. Her bed had not been slept in. Her clothes were still there. She had never returned. Before she disappeared, Kelly had walked to a payphone near a Shell gas station on Merrick Road in Lynbrook. She met a friend there and made a few calls. After that, her trail went cold. The payphone became the last fixed point in her story, the final place where her movements were known. Beyond it, there was only absence. Kelly had not seemed like a runaway to the people who knew her best. She was social, impulsive, and young, but not the kind of girl who would sever contact with everyone and start over in silence. Months passed with no sign of her. Her mother learned what many families of the missing learn. Every stranger seen from behind began to look familiar. Every crowd held the possibility of a miracle. Every false hope cut deeper than the last. Kelly had made close friends after her family moved from Massapequa to Lynbrook. One of the first was Theresa Fusco. The two girls were young teenagers in the same orbit, part of a world shaped by handwritten letters, shopping trips, and nights at hot skates, the roller rink that served as the center of teenage life in the area. In 1984, hot skates was where kids went to meet friends, hear music, flirt, and lose track of time. It felt harmless. It felt safe. Theresa Fusco was 16. She was close to her best friend Lisa Kaplan. They dressed alike, talked about everything, and planned sleepovers the way most girls their age did. Theresa was part of that same suburban rhythm that had carried Kelly through Lynbrook only months earlier. She walked around the neighborhood without fear. Her family did not think twice about her going out alone. No one yet understood that a predator could move through those same streets unseen. On November 10, 1984, 5 months after Kelly disappeared, Theresa went to work at Hot Skates. At some point that evening, she was fired. Upset and shaken, she left. She was supposed to go to Lisa Kaplan's house afterward and stay the night. Lisa waited for her. 9 o'clock came and went. Then 9:30, then 10. At first, it seemed possible that Theresa had changed plans. Maybe she had gone home. Maybe she had gone to another friend's house. The concern did not become fear until the next morning when Theresa's mother called asking for her daughter. Theresa had never made it to Lisa's house. She had not gone home either. The missing girl from June and the missing girl from November knew each other. They came from the same small area. They moved along the same roads. They were only months apart in age. The pattern was impossible to ignore. Yet there was still no clear answer to what had happened to either of them. Lynbrook searched for Theresa. Friends, relatives, and neighbors spread through the places teenagers usually gathered. They checked the familiar hangouts and side streets. They watched the days drag forward with nothing to show for it. Nearly a month passed. Then, 25 days after Theresa disappeared, 2 boys went into a wooded area near the Long Island Railroad tracks and saw a body. Theresa Fusco had been hidden beneath leaves and wooden shipping pallets. Her death shattered the illusion that Kelly's disappearance might have been an isolated mystery. Theresa had been beaten, raped, and strangled. What had begun as another missing person case became something far darker. The fear that had been hanging over Lynbrook now had a shape. Someone had taken a teenage girl off the street and killed her. The murder shook not just Theresa's family and friends, but the wider community. Teenagers who had once walked anywhere at any hour now saw the neighborhood differently. Parents who had trusted the ordinary routines of suburban life began to question them. Hot skates, Merrick Road, the roads to school and work, the paths to a friend's house after dark all seemed altered. Nothing had changed physically, but everything felt different. The case moved quickly toward a suspect. John Cogut, a 21-year-old landscaper, had briefly dated Kelly Morrissey. He was also linked to Dennis Halstead, a man whose apartment stood near the Shell gas station where Kelly had last been seen. Kelly had spent time there. She reportedly had a key. Halstead was older than the girls and looked to many around him like a bad influence who drifted at the edge of younger kids' lives. Another man, John Restivo, was also drawn into the circle. Cogut was questioned about both Kelly's disappearance and Theresa's murder. He denied involvement. He took a polygraph. He was interrogated through the night and into the next morning. After nearly 12 hours of questioning, his denials changed. He gave a confession that described a van, Theresa walking away from hot skates, and an attack involving himself, Dennis Halstead, and John Restivo. In that account, Theresa was raped by Halstead and Restivo. When she threatened to tell someone, she was killed. The confession seemed detailed and powerful. It gave the case a clear theory: 3 men in a van, a teenage girl taken off the street, a murder committed to silence her. For a community desperate for answers, the story felt like the end of uncertainty. Cogut's confession implicated Halstead and Restivo, and all 3 were charged with the rape and murder of Theresa Fusco. Then another girl disappeared. On March 26, 1985, 19-year-old Jackie Martorella failed to show up for her shift at Burger King. She lived in Oceanside, only a few miles away. Like Kelly and Theresa, Jackie often walked where she needed to go. She was dependable and punctual. Her family knew immediately that something was wrong. She had recently finished high school, was taking accounting classes, and was saving money to buy a car. She was described as girly, careful about her clothes, and still young enough to have posters of teen idols on her bedroom wall. Her life looked ordinary. Her plans were simple. She disappeared anyway. For nearly a month, Jackie remained missing. Then, on April 22, 1985, a man looking for golf balls in the rough near the 17th hole of a Woodmere golf course found her body in the tall grass. Jackie had also been raped and strangled. Her body was badly decomposed. No usable sexual assault sample could be taken. The similarities to Theresa's killing were impossible to dismiss. Yet by then, John Cogut was already in custody. The man who had confessed to murdering Theresa could not have abducted Jackie on the day she vanished. That fact broke the case wide open again. The 3 young women became part of one haunting landscape. Kelly Morrissey had vanished and never been found. Theresa Fusco had disappeared and been discovered murdered near hot skates. Jackie Martorella had vanished and turned up dead on a golf course weeks later. The community now had 3 names, 3 broken timelines, and no certainty about how the crimes connected. Even so, the prosecution against Cogut, Halstead, and Restivo moved ahead. In 1985 and 1986, the cases went to trial. Cogut was tried first. Halstead and Restivo were tried together. The confession remained central. So did physical evidence that appeared to support it, including hairs said to belong to Theresa and found on the floor of Restivo's van. The defense pointed to problems with the theory, including evidence that the van had not even been working at the time of Theresa's disappearance. But the confession carried enormous weight. By February 1987, all 3 men had been convicted and sentenced to more than 30 years to life. For Theresa's family, the convictions seemed like closure after 2 painful years. For Lynbrook, they seemed like an answer. The story had finally been pinned down. Theresa Fusco's killers were in prison. Kelly Morrissey was still missing, and Jackie Martorella's murder was still unsolved. But at least one part of the darkness appeared settled. It was not settled at all. In 2003, nearly 19 years after Theresa was killed, advances in DNA testing reopened the case. The sexual assault evidence from Theresa did not match John Cogut, Dennis Halstead, or John Restivo. Instead, it pointed to another man entirely, someone unknown. The convictions collapsed under the weight of that result. One by one, the three men were exonerated and released after spending nearly 18 years in prison. The reversal did more than free three men. It destroyed the official story that had shaped the case for almost 2 decades. The confession that once looked definitive became suspect. The physical evidence that had seemed so persuasive became deeply questionable. The old certainty was replaced by something worse than doubt. It was now possible that the wrong men had been taken off the street while the real killer had gone on living unnoticed. Yet even after the DNA reversal, the case did not end cleanly. The prosecution tried John Coercion again in 2005, leaning heavily on the videotaped confession. The argument was that the confession mattered more than the DNA. The defense attacked that confession piece by piece. Coercion had a limited education. He had substance abuse problems. He had been questioned for nearly 12 hours, held for 18, and had been awake for almost 30 by the time the video was made. In the footage, he struggled with names and asked for help. What once looked like a guilty man recounting his crime began to look like a man repeating a version of events fed to him. There was another problem. To explain away the DNA from an unknown male, a new theory emerged. Theresa must have had a consensual sexual encounter with someone else before her abduction. But the people who knew her best rejected that idea completely. Theresa was described as a girl who was not sexually active, not someone secretly slipping into an encounter at the roller rink where she worked. The theory strained credulity and cut directly against the life she had led. Questions also grew around the hairs allegedly found in Restivo's van. According to later arguments, the hair showed decomposition changes consistent with having come from a dead person, not a living one. That raised a chilling possibility. If true, they could not have been left during an abduction. They may have been introduced later after Theresa's body had been recovered. At the end of the 2005 retrial, the confession was rejected as false and unreliable. John Coercion was found not guilty. Days later, the charges against John Restivo and Dennis Halstead were dismissed. Theresa Fusco had now been dead for more than 20 years, and the legal system had not merely failed to solve her murder. It had locked away 3 innocent men while leaving the true source of the DNA unidentified. The damage spread outward. Restivo and Halstead later won major civil awards. Coercion did not. But money could not return the years taken from any of them. The case became one of the most disturbing examples of wrongful conviction tied to a false confession on Long Island. It also left behind a second wound. Theresa's family and closest friends had lived through the crime once, then the trials, then the reversal, and then the collapse of the second prosecution. Each time they were told the truth had finally been reached, that truth dissolved. Meanwhile, the other 2 girls remained in the shadows. Kelly Morrissey was never found. Her family lived with the agony unique to a disappearance without a body, a crime scene, or a final answer. Jackie Martirella's murder also remained unsolved. No one was charged in either case. Their names endured beside Theresa's, bound together by geography, timing, and violence, but separated by evidence that never became complete enough to close the circle. For years, Theresa Fusco's case sat cold. The unknown DNA profile remained the one clear piece of truth inside a story crowded with mistakes. That profile belonged to the man who had raped and killed her. He had gone unidentified through the 1980s, through the trials, through the wrongful convictions, and through the exonerations. He had grown older while the case stood still. Then genetic genealogy changed the trajectory of the investigation. The unknown male DNA was traced through family lines until it led to a man named Richard Bilodeau. By then, he was 63 years old, living in Center Moriches and working at Walmart stocking shelves. In 1984, he had been 23 and living about a mile from hot skates and about a mile from Theresa Fusco's home. He had lived close to the center of the story all along, below notice, outside suspicion, and untouched by the disasters that swallowed so many others. Surveillance followed. A discarded smoothie cup and straw provided a direct comparison. The DNA matched. After more than 4 decades, the identity behind the unknown genetic profile was no longer unknown. Richard Bilodeau had not been part of the old theory. Theresa's friends and family did not recognize his name as someone tied to her life in 1984. No public story had ever placed him in her circle. Yet the DNA tied him to the attack with a force that had never existed in the original prosecutions. The same evidence once dismissed as meaningless had become the key that finally opened the case. And still, the passage of time had not made the ending simple. The case carried the weight of everything that came before it. The false confession, the ruined lives of Kogut, Restivo, and Halstead, the years lost to prison, the grief endured by Theresa's family under one version of the truth and then another. Any final account of Theresa Fusco's murder had to pass through all of that wreckage first. The older mystery remained as well. Richard Belladell was linked to Theresa Fusco, but not charged in the cases of Kelly Morrissey or Jackie Martorella. Kelly was still gone. Jackie's killing was still unresolved. That left Long Island with one answer and two open wounds. Kelly Morrissey would have grown into a woman in her 50s. For those who loved her, she remained fixed at 15, walking away from home after dinner, heading toward a payphone near a Shell station on Merrick Road, expecting to return before 9:30. Her case never produced the terrible certainty that Theresa's did. It produced something quieter and in some ways harder to survive. It produced endless waiting. Jackie Martorella remained 19 in memory, forever on her way to a Burger King shift she never reached. Still saving for a car, still balancing work and accounting classes, still moving through an ordinary life that was cut short without warning. Her death in the grass of a Woodmere golf course became part of the same nightmare, but never part of a finished case. Theresa Fusco's story stretched longest through the courts, but it began in the same simple way as the others. A teenage girl left a familiar place and did not make it to the next one. She was not taken from a dangerous underworld or a secret life. She was taken from the ordinary spaces of suburban adolescence. A roller rink, a road home, a planned sleepover with a best friend. That was what made the case endure in local memory. It was never distant. It happened in the spaces where children were supposed to be safe. The years transformed everyone around it. Friends grew into adults. Parents aged under the strain of grief. A district attorney who had once been a young woman hearing about the case in college eventually stood at the center of its final breakthrough. The legal and emotional timeline became so long that it outlived the assumptions of one generation and passed into the next. But the core of the story never changed. 3 young women disappeared in Nassau County in less than a year. One was found beneath leaves and pallets. One was found in tall grass off a golf course. One was never found at all. For Theresa Fusco, the road to the truth was not direct. It passed first through fear, then through certainty, then through error, then through collapse, and only decades later through science capable of correcting what human judgment had failed to see. Her murder became a case about violence, but also about memory, mistaken belief, and the terrible cost of getting the wrong answer. In the end, the neighborhood that once trusted the dark had learned a lesson it never wanted. Safety had been an illusion. Familiar roads could still hide danger. A payphone, a roller rink, a walk to work, a short trip through a quiet suburban night could become the last known moment in a life. Kelly Morrissey stepped out after dinner and vanished. Theresa Fusco left hot skates and was taken, raped, and killed. Jackie Martorella walked toward her shift and never arrived. For decades, the truth behind at least one of those crimes stayed buried under bad evidence, false confession, and the passage of time. But Theresa Fusco's case did not disappear, it waited. And after more than 40 years, the unknown DNA left behind on a 16-year-old girl finally led back to the man who had carried her story into darkness. Even then, the ending was incomplete. One family still had no body to bury, another still had no name tied to a murder, and all 3 cases remained bound together in the memory of Long Island, where the summer of 1984 and the spring of 1985 never fully let go.